And we welcome up now Hannah Kaya of NFU's Farmworker organizer. Hannah is here with us today in person in Saskatoon. She's a farm worker living primarily in Wakefield, Quebec, on unceded Anishinaabe territory, where she spent the last 2 seasons working as a farmhand on a small-scale, organic, diversified vegetable farm. She recently joined the NFU staff as a farm worker organizer. Hannah has worked in different pockets of the food system, including restaurants, community gardens, and food justice movements. Like many new entrants into agriculture, Hannah was first drawn to farming as a way to heal her alienation from non-human nature and to provide tangibly to communities in need. And again, like many new entrants, she both instantly fell in love with the work and came to know its less romantic aspects. She is inspired to help grow a food system that provides accessible, healthy food while respecting ecological limits and providing dignified work for the hands that move the soil. She has been invigorated by the incredible conversations that she's had with the Farmworker working group. Members of that group, as well as her colleagues and co-workers in Wakefield, have helped from the perspective she brings to this panel. So we welcome up Hannah to speak now. Thanks, Hannah.
I've been asked to speak to how the work we've been doing with the Farm Worker Working Group engages our convention's topics and mounts a challenge to corporate power. So as you all know, last year's convention attendees passed a resolution to create a farm worker specific membership category. I'm excited to take this opportunity to introduce you all to some of the work that we've been up to since last February, when we first started to convene as farm workers within the NFU, to speak to specific ways farm workers are impacted by corporate capture of our food systems and how our work is fitting into a broader struggle against corporate dominance. I got involved in farm worker organizing after a difficult experience with employer-provided housing at a small-scale organic farm. Finding safe and affordable housing on or off farm is a significant challenge as a farm worker, and I've had many conversations with other farm workers who have found themselves facing precarious housing. I had known about the NFU for a little while, so I reached out to Jesse, who then put me in touch with Dave, to see whether advocacy or research had been done on housing for farm workers. I was told that while the NFU has for decades advocated for rural vitality, there hasn't been much movement on the specific issue of employer-provided housing, especially unofficial housing for resident workers. What had been recently developed was a farm worker membership. I was enormously excited to learn this. And I signed up during the NFU membership days, and a bunch of friends signed up with me. Soon after getting my membership, I joined a call of maybe 30 farm workers and their allies across the country in a conversation around farm work. We are united in our shared grievances: unpredictable hours, undercompensated work, a serious lack of affordable rural housing, work without health benefits, and in many cases without basic worker protections which apply to workers in other sectors, like minimum wage, guaranteed rest periods, and the right to collectively bargain for a fair contract. We are acutely aware of the toll farming takes on mental and physical health and the barriers that people face, both financial and physical, in committing themselves to this work. Our group has since developed and formalized into an official NFU working group with committed core members. You've likely met myself, Anna, Adama, Camille, Mira, or Hannon throughout convention, or seen Ash and Elle online. Currently, our core attendees are majority white, settler, and university educated. All active members of the working group are resident workers who work on small to medium scale organic farms, and our ranks don't include workers at large work sites like big greenhouses. Our core group of active and enthusiastic resident farm workers are organizers who want living wages, improved rural infrastructure, including safe and affordable housing and transport, and full citizen and labor rights for all agricultural workers. As we've met monthly, we've discovered that we are united in our commitment to support migrant-led movements for regularization and justice for migrant workers, to land rematriation and decolonization, to supporting queer and BIPOC farmers and farm workers, and to ecological justice. Camille, Hannon, and I were able to get out to the picket lines in support of striking CUPE education workers in Ontario, united in our calls for the Ontario government to honor collective bargaining rights for all workers. We conducted interviews with many farm workers and farm labor experts and wrote an article for Briar Patch magazine, which was emailed to you all in a previous bulletin, so check that out. And we've begun brainstorming for a multifaceted education and outreach campaign to help it happen this winter, including a Know Your Rights workshop for farm workers and learning from others who are already doing this work. And importantly, we've been building relationships in mutual aid and trust. That's a bit about us. I want to be clear that individual farm owners, especially on small and medium-scale farms, should not be made out to be solely responsible for the challenges of being a farm worker. In most cases, because of the size of the farms we've worked on, we've developed relationships with our employers, and in most cases knew that they were doing their best to provide us with adequate compensation and fair and safe working conditions. Organizing as farm workers within the NFU, we find ourselves in a complicated yet powerful opportunity for solidarity, a solidarity which acknowledges the power imbalances that are endemic to any employer-employee relationship, but which also recognizes that it is a food system rooted in corporate greed, the chronic undervaluing of the work it takes to produce food, farm debt, and exclusions from labor regulations, which contribute to the exploitation of farm workers in the industry. It is this system that is set up to fail both us and our employers. As we've heard throughout our time together, a shrinking number of agribusiness corporations have captured the vast majority of farm revenues, leaving farmers just 5%. And that's a number I found in our climate crisis report. This 5% is where our wages as farm workers are coming from. The corporate capture of farm revenue means that as workers on small and mid-sized farms, we're often working for employers who are in a constant survival state and are therefore more likely to offer low wages and require machine-like efficiency in the field in order to cut labor costs. Corporate control is inherently anti-worker. Independent farms are competing on the market with massive corporate firms using the most exploitive labor practices imaginable, including offering the lowest possible wages, relying on unfree labor, and making use of punitive surveillance technologies. So, we see the monitoring of migrant workers in greenhouses, where you spend time on a line picking vegetables and then you clock your time. That time is recorded and measured, and then the bottom 5 of those who don't achieve a set quota are punished with no work and no pay for up to 2 to 3 days. Just as an example. Corporate domination of the market exerts downward pressure on independent farmers to implement similar practices and drive down labor costs, one of the highest input costs, especially on organic farms, in order to compete. These working conditions are pattern-setting working conditions. So winning collective bargaining for farm workers on these large corporate sites is a win, then, for all workers in the industry. The way we fight corporate power and the corporate takeover of our food system isn't just in asking the government to regulate corporate power. And we've discussed already over the past 3 days many different ways to be fighting corporate capture. This morning, we heard from Derek and Renata about how coalitions of labor and other civil society groups, that is, the power of workers and other social movements, united across sectors in the fight for dignity and justice, has continually challenged corporate greed and won dignified conditions. If we're going to take back our food systems and build food sovereignty in our communities, we're going to need strong worker-led social movements. We're going to need sectoral bargaining power to go after the biggest and worst employers from being able to drive down market costs through exploitative labor practices. A worker-centered movement composed of migrant and resident farm workers and their allies can bring justice to the food system. Derek spoke earlier on the United Food and Commercial Workers' efforts to build farm worker power and win justice for migrant workers at large work sites. Though we're still finding our footing, the Farm Worker Working Group aims to be able to support work already being done by groups like UFCW, the Migrant Rights Network, Justicia for Migrants, to build leverage at the bargaining table and in the streets, to oppose corporate interests and restore agency to all workers at all points of the food system. As we in the working group clarify our strategies and goals, it's clear that we recognize the need to organize on all fronts. So this includes building coalitions between resident and migrant workers, making inroads at larger corporate work sites, growing a grassroots base of mobilized farm workers who can both share grievances and successful tactics to improve working conditions now, and using the NFU's existing resources and expertise on policy and research to move farm worker issues at different levels of government, like our consultations on the National Labor Strategy. By having the working group support the call for status, like the resolution we brought to convention, we are contributing to movements that aim to take away one of the main levers that corporate agriculture uses to exploit workers and set labor trends. I love being a farm worker. I love working hard and coming home at the end of the day exhausted. I love the camaraderie of working with people who've been driven to the sector by a desire to feed their communities and who care about being a connection to the earth. I love feeling the dirt under my fingernails and the rough, permanently browned edges that mark my index finger and disclose to the world that I work with the land, and I'm really missing it now that I'm in my off season. Don't recognize my hands. It's these experiences that keep me in the industry. However, much of my experience of being a farm worker has also been marked by a lack of structural agency. I have little to no say in the conditions of my contract. Yet another example of how corporate and market interests exert more control over how our food is grown, than the wisdom of land workers. This feeling of alienation, just gonna say, is not unique to our sector. It is the condition of being a worker in our current economic system. So for me, one of the most important ways that the Farm Worker Working Group resists corporate control is by challenging its monopoly over what we think is possible. This isn't just a financial asset-based monopoly we're talking about, it's also, in an important way, a conceptual monopoly. Meeting monthly with fellow farm workers is allowing me to build relationships outside of the exertive pressure of the profit motive. It's helping me to build my sense of competence and confidence that we might be able to join forces and exert influence on the food system to restore some of that lost agency by imagining a food system that centers justice for the land and those that work it, and engaging in the work to build that reality. And I just want to end with a little pitch for any farm workers in the room or online to join our monthly meetings. We meet the second Wednesday of every month over Zoom. We've also got some exciting campaigns work on the way. We got funding through the UFCW to do this multifaceted education and outreach campaign. We were doing still a lot of brainstorming. It's a really great place to be. And we're also going to be doing some of us are going to be doing a 6-week organizer training hosted by Jane McAlevey, who's a really incredible US-based labor organizer. So if you have any interest in joining that organizer training, it's not just for farm workers. I think everyone in the NFU would benefit from it. You can email me at Kaya, that's Kaya, @nfu.ca. It'll be getting more into the weeds of how to organize. Great, thanks.